My name is Aubrey. At one point in all of our lives, we have had questions that go through our minds, such as, how are the clouds made? Why does the sun shine so bright? Well, a question that went through my mind a few months ago was mountains. How are they made? Who formed them? Why do they even exist? If you live in the northern or western part of the United States, you can wake up and simply walk outside to a beautiful view of the mountains. The free online dictionary gives us a definition of a mountain. A natural elevation of Earth's surface, having considerable mass, generally steep sides, and a height greater than that of a hill. So are mountains formed from water, faults, or have they eroded over millions and billions of years? I will be comparing and contrasting the ideas of a geologist, as well as a creationist, on the topic of how mountains have and are forming. The Earth is made up of plate tectonics and plate boundaries. The process of Earth sciences and the advancement of technologies associated with the understanding of our planet during the 1940s and 1950s have led geologists to develop a new way of looking at the world and how it works. Scientists and geologists hold the perspective that mountains are mostly formed on a fault or fault line, such as the one shown here. These are two different plates, one being subducted under the other, as the other one is trying to push it away. At the fault, rocks have broken. The rocks on one side of the fault have moved past the rocks on the other side. In contrast, a fault line is a line that stretches along the ground. The fault line is where the fault cuts the Earth's surface. Faults come in all sizes, from small ones, whose short fault lines you can see through a single road cut, or to huge faults, whose long fault lines can be seen best in pictures taken from orbiting satellites. According to a geologist, this is the difference between a fault and a fault line. Within the Earth's crust, there are several different kinds of faults. A fault line is where two or more of the Earth's tectonic plates come together or move apart. They move in one or more formations called boundaries. There are three types of faults within a plate boundary. The first is a transform boundary. That's where one plate slides past the other. This is the process where two faults slide past each other, then causing an earthquake in the Earth's crust. The second is divergence, which is where two plates move slowly over time away from each other. This may potentially lead to a continental drift. Last but not least, there is convergence. Convergence is when two or more plates start colliding together. Convergence can cause underground earthquakes. They can also cause a continent to subduct under one another, under the surface of the Earth. Mountains are created when two of the Earth's tectonic plates crash together. The convergent boundary is set and running. The two plates coming at each other collide, and the lighter, less dense continent subducts under the other. Over time, the continents continue to move together. While they are moving and smashing into each other, the plates are folding upwards into the shape of a mountain. When the product is finished, it is called a folded mountain. It is just as if you cut a folded rock, also known as metamorphic rock. You will see the folds in the core layers of the rock. The University.com's website gives us this insight into another way that mountains could be formed. Another way that mountains are formed is when magma from beneath the Earth's surface is pushed up but doesn't actually crack through. The bowls of the magma eventually cools and hardens into a rock, like granite. The layers of softer rock above the magma erode away, and you're left with a large dome-shaped mountain. Of course, if the magma actually cracks through the surface, you get a volcano. Regular eruptions of lava, ash, and rock buildup of a volcano lead to larger heights. In fact, some of the tallest mountains in the world are volcanoes. So there's still one thing missing. How do all the tectonic plates move into these forms? Well, this is the convection currents working with the mantle of the Earth. Convection currents are inside the Earth's mantle, moving in circular motions, creating a current which moves the boundaries in the rotation of that specific current. Therefore, the currents create collisions between continents as well as push them apart. In 1990, a geologist named Arthur Holmes first came up with a theory of convection currents. Warning that his ideas were purely speculative, he suggested that rocks in the interior of Earth would buoyantly rise towards the surface of the deep with the earth when heated by radioactivity and then sink back down as they cooled and became denser. Holmes theorized that the convection currents came through the mantle the same way heated air circulates through a room and radically reshapes the Earth's surface in the process. He proposed that upward convection might lift or even rupture the crust. That lateral movement could propel the crust sideways like a conveyor belt. And that where convection turned downwards, the buoyant continents would crumble up and form mountains. In another perspective, creationists believe that mountains and canyons were formed by God through the great floods that is mentioned in Genesis chapter 7, starting in verse 5. And Noah did all according that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. So Noah and his sons, his wives, and his sons' wives went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean animals and of animals that are unclean, of birds and every thing that creeps on the earth. 2 by 2 they went into the ark to Noah, male and female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 7th day of the month, on that day, all of the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now if we skip a few verses to verse 17, it says, Now the flood was on the earth 40 days. The waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about the surface of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains, Hebrew word means hills, were covered. And then in verse 24 continues by saying, And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. According to Genesis, mountains were created by sudden erosion and water coming up from the earth. There were only hills at the time of the flood. Creationists believe that the flood caused all the formations of the steepest mountains to our deep canyons with all the water that was involved with the flood. As seen in verse 19, there were already mountains or hills on the earth. But we know that the mountains surely could not have been as tall as Mount Everest. Otherwise, many people on the ark would not have had enough oxygen to survive. Scientists today say that Mount Everest grows about 2 centimeters every year. According to creation scientists, the Earth is less than 6,000 years old. That would mean that Mount Everest has only grown at the most 120 meters in the past 6,000 years. That is not really enough to make a difference in the altitude. So from this calculation, the mountains would have already almost entirely been informed by the flood waters of the earth. Also in verse 24, we see that water was the only thing on the earth for 150 days. That would mean, according to Genesis, that the earth would not have had millions and billions of years to weather and erode away at the hills and mountains. With all the pressure of water sinking back into the earth, all the water flowing in every direction at extremely high speeds, it would cut through anything it could, therefore forming mountains. Both geologists as well as creationists agree that mountains were formed mostly by erosion. The major difference in the two theories is just a matter of time. Creationists believe that all erosion happened rapidly, and geologists believe that erosion of the mountains took millions and billions of years to occur. Whether or not we have found the correct source of how the mountains were formed, they are still going to keep growing and keep forming. I personally am glad they are there. The mountains give us a great, beautiful sight to observe each day. Thank you.